The Stanley Cup playoff bracket is now set, and it is now, of course, time for many of us to try to predict the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, I did a video on this channel 2 years ago where I did predict the Avalanche to win it all. Of course, let's not talk about who I had them playing that year, but it's time for us to start again. Before we get into this, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on this. So, they're starting off with the Winnipeg Jets versus the St. Louis Blues. The Winnipeg Jets, arguably the best team of the season, versus the St. Louis Blues, the best team as of late. Now, I didn't know this was here. Obviously, the Jets, 114 points, winning their first ever President's Trophy. They've looked pretty good. However, the St. Louis Blues, as of late, have been clearly the best team. A 12-game win streak to get into the playoffs. It was clearly a great run. However, I do believe that Winnipeg will outlast them in probably 6 games. I think it's going to be a fun series. And next up, we have the Dallas Stars versus the Colorado Avalanche. Seeds 2 and seeds 3 basically almost even. Exact goals per game. Exact goals against, not really goals against per game. The Colorado Avalanche have allowed more. The Colorado Avalanche power play looks better, and their Stars penalty kill is better, as we see. Nathan MacKinnon has been absolutely incredible. Remember all the rumors we thought Sidney Crosby playing alongside of him? That obviously clearly didn't happen. But I just take a look at the stat breakdown here. I think this is going to be a great series to watch. However, though, I do feel like the Colorado Avalanche will beat the Dallas Stars. It's going to be a fun series, though, to watch. I think they're going to beat them in 7 games. Moving on next, Vegas Golden Knights versus the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild really started the year well, but they kind of faded towards the end. Obviously, you have Philip Gustafsson. He started the season really, really well. And then he kind of got a little iffy as the year went on. But Vegas' power play has been very, very good this year. Definitely outdoing Minnesota Wild. I think that Vegas Golden Knights will beat Minnesota Wild in 5 games. Los Angeles Kings versus Edmonton Oilers. In fact, the 4th year in a row that these guys will be facing off in the playoffs. Obviously, the Kings have been the better team this year. Points-wise, not really, though, because if you look, goals against per game, the Kings obviously better in that category, but the Edmonton Oilers do get more goals. Obviously, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. But when those two weren't there, this team really wasn't that good. Obviously, they made it to the Cup last year. It's going to be hard for them to repeat for sure. I see the Kings downing them. And now we got to do all the games. So 6 games for them, 7 here, 5. And I see them beating them in 7 games. I think that'll be a 7-game series. That's going to be a very fun series to watch. The Kings, wouldn't really call them the underdog, but I do consider them the underdog in this scenario. I think LA will beat them. So moving on to the East, we have Toronto Maple Leafs versus Ottawa Senators. Toronto doesn't really know how to win playoff series. Oh my, going to have a bunch of people going after me for that one. Toronto, just the other year or 2 ago? I don't remember what it was. Finally winning their first playoff series since the early 2000s. However, take a look at some of the stats here in the analysis. The Senators look pretty good. Brady Tkachuk, he looked really, really well in the Four Nations League. So finally giving this guy some playoff hockey, I think is going to allow them to be really well. However, I do think the Maple Leafs are going to come out on top in this. They're going to win in 6 games. This is definitely going to be a fun series to watch, though. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Florida Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champions. They haven't looked that good coming into the playoffs, though. Florida obviously kind of slumping more like the last month or so. I don't fully quote me on that. I haven't really been watching the Florida Panthers too much. The Lightning, though, also have looked really well. They have an insane goals per game over the Florida Panthers, 3.7 to 3.0. Goals against, same thing. Tampa clearly, in every single stat line we look, is better than Florida. However, I do think the Florida Panthers will come out on top in probably 6 or 7 games. This is going to be a really fun series to watch. Next up, we have the Capitals versus the Canadiens. This is really, really surprising considering the Capitals minus 37 goal differential. I believe the worst goal differential in the modern era for a playoff team. 91 points. They were the first playoff team to clinch this year, or first team to clinch the playoffs this year compared to being the last team last year. They're facing the Montreal Canadiens, who looked good in the middle of the season. Then they definitely lost some steam heading into the playoffs. In fact, the Blue Jackets almost came back to take this number 8 spot. The Blue Jackets were looking absolutely incredible. Washington, though, as of late, their goaltending doesn't look that good. Obviously, Logan Thompson hurt. He is expected to be back, I believe, in the first round. Same with Alexei Protas. Obviously, Ovi has looked really good for being 39 years old. He scored 43 goals this year. Of course, I'm recording this video before the games tonight. The final games are Washington plays Pittsburgh. I do feel like Washington is going to cruise by the Penguins. They're playing the Penguins tonight. The Canadians really look better in every single category this year. Washington has had a great offense this year compared to last year. I believe number 1 scoring team. That might be wrong. I believe they're number 2 or number 3. Dylan Strome, 81 points, is their top points leader. It's kind of a lot of Washington Capitals players have had career years this year. Connor McMichael, Tom Wilson's had a great year. Alexei Protas, Logan Thompson has been great. Charlie Lindgren hasn't looked bad either. His stat lines just don't really show. I believe that the Capitals will beat the Canadians in 5 games. I'm obviously coming from a Capitals fan myself. I might be a little biased. Fun fact, though, coming into these playoffs, the Capitals have lost 7 playoff games in a row, so hopefully that streak will come to an end. Next up, Carolina versus the New Jersey Devils. I do believe that this is a rematch from the Stanley Cup Playoffs 2 years ago, I want to say. I'm not entirely for sure on that, though, so don't quote me. Carolina had a good year. Obviously, Washington had an even better year. 99 points. New Jersey, arguably in the beginning of the season, looked like they were going to be the ones to win the Metro, but they kind of fell off towards the middle of the season. But as you see, New Jersey does allow less goals than Carolina, and their power play looks really, really good compared to Carolina. However, I do believe that the Carolina Hurricanes will outlast them in 7 games. So 7 games here, 5 games here. I believe we said 6 for Florida and 6 for Toronto. Moving on to the second round of the playoffs, the Winnipeg Jets versus the Colorado Avalanche. Going to be a great series for sure. Obviously, as we take a look at their stats lined up against them, I did not mean to click that. They look pretty good. The exact goals per game amount, their goals against, obviously Colorado allows more. However, the President's Trophy curse, say it's a thing or not, I do believe that the Colorado Avalanche will outlast them to get to the conference final. Down to the Golden Knights versus the Los Angeles Kings. LA, again, a team coming really out of nowhere. Well, I wouldn't say out of nowhere. They're pretty consistent. They're mostly a good team. Basically, exact stats, goals per game, still less. I do believe that Vegas will outlast them. Actually, no. I think the Kings will get through them. That's a very controversial pick. But yeah. Next, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Florida Panthers. Florida getting back to the Cup last year. To win it was a great story to see. However, and I do believe that they will surpass the Toronto Maple Leafs again. The Maple Leafs still can't really win the playoff series. Will this be the year they do it? Maybe, now that I talk a bunch of smack about them not doing it. But it's just one of those teams where they think that they can win it all. They get overconfident, and it never really happens. Florida going to the conference final probably in 6 games. Washington versus Carolina. Is this a playoff series we would not want to see? 2019 round 1 rematch where Carolina beat them in 7 games, and that watching these teams play each other in the regular season was a lot of fun to watch. I think that this is going to be a really, really, really fun series to watch. But I unfortunately don't want to say this, but I guess I will. I do believe that Carolina will come out on top. Washington just hasn't looked that well lately. And yeah, I think Carolina, it's going to be a 7-game series for sure. Now to the conference final for each of these teams. It's your set. Here's your final 4. Colorado versus LA and Florida versus Carolina. I do believe that this will be a fun series to watch. However, I think Colorado will beat LA in 6 games, just not LA. Obviously, probably doesn't really have the power that Colorado would have. And meanwhile, in here, same thing, kind of a close series. I do think Carolina will get out on top in 7 games. 6 games. Florida obviously kind of slumped the last month. So our Stanley Cup champion, it's either Colorado or Carolina. These teams have been great all year. However, I do think that Colorado will come out on top with, obviously, you have Nate McKinnon. That team looks really well this year. I think that they can win this game. Potentially in 6 games. It's going to be a very fun Stanley Cup playoffs to watch. Predict the total number of goals in the Stanley Cup finals. Well, 6 games. I think we're going to say about 31 goals. Is that enough? That's like 5 goals per game. Maybe we should do like 34. But yes, that will be... submit it? Well, I'll do that in a minute. But that will be it. Obviously, it's going to be a fun playoffs to watch. I can't wait to see it. A lot of good matchups going. A lot of sleeper picks. Obviously, we didn't think St. Louis was going to make it. They were obviously the hottest team in the last month. I believe they had a 12-game win streak at one point. But it's going to be a very fun playoffs to watch. Washington, they were a big story this year. Ottawa making it back to the playoffs. I believe it's the first time in 7 years that they have been in the playoffs. But that will do it for me today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to watch this video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know if you want to see more hockey content and more brackets like these. But Orbit the Chameleon is out. Hold on a second. Alright, Orbit the Chameleon is officially out.